Hi everyone, and welcome to the Bear Necessities. I'm Bear, and today we are working with pumpkins. It's fall in Central Texas, which means it's, not 100 degrees or 40 in centigrade for those of you who don't subscribe to the imperial system. And I have the need to make pumpkins. Now, you can go and buy your pumpkins in a can, like your pumpkin meat and everything in a can, and it's good. There's a couple of brands that are really excellent. And what they do is they chop the pumpkins up, get all the seeds and everything out, and they kind of boil them a little just to kind of loosen them. Sometimes they steam them, and some even roast them, but not many, just because that's a time-consuming process. And they let the pumpkins dry out ever so slightly, and then they blend them down, skin and all, and put that into the cans. And the skin itself is actually edible. We won't be doing that with ours because we are going to roast these, and the skin becomes incredibly leathery, and that's not pleasant for anyone. And it doesn't blend down very well to that smooth consistency that we're going to be looking for. And what I have here are 3 very lovely Central Texas grown pumpkins. And pumpkins grow here incredibly well. A lot of farmers have been going towards some of the more heirloom varieties, like we see here. These are 3 heirloom varieties. Some of them are more Northern Atlantic, Northern US style, and two that I have here are more traditional, kind of. This is a hybrid of some older French pumpkins. This one is called the Porcelain Doll. It grows in West Texas really well, out in the sandy soil, for some reason. They love it. And up on the plains of Texas. And it is marked by kind of a milky skin as it's young. And they'll start out milky and green. And then as they get larger, they turn pink. They are a true pink pumpkin. And then as they get older, as you can see, this one's no longer pink. It's actually on the orange scale, but it has a pink kind of glow to it. It has pink tones to it, and we'll hold on to those. This one was harvested a little bit young. In fact, all 3 of these were harvested just a little bit on the young side. Just because they wanted them to be able to make it through the farmer's market where I got them, and that's fine because they'll still roast down beautifully. And let me just open this one. Ones like this, the Porcelain Doll, have an incredibly bright flesh to them. That I got some pumpkin seeds and I have my big bowl, so I needed to throw it in there. These pumpkins are nutty and sweet. They have a very sweet flesh, and when you roast them, they caramelize even more. The flesh gets really tender. This is the flesh, by the way. The flesh gets really, really tender and just so sweet. They can get to a candy sweet state, especially if they're allowed to age much longer. But those have to age on the vine, of course. Once you cut it, they stop. That's it. That's the only growth you're going to get. And these can get to be a good satellite size, up to 20 to 30 pounds, I believe. This one was about 12. So you can imagine, much, much larger, but they are a little bit of the flat side too, with lovely ribbing. And again, that pink skin, they're just so pretty. And I'm just going to, I say, snap off the stem if I can. There we go. That way when it's roasting, it's easier. I have 2 baking sheets with parchment because I am a dreamer and hope that these will actually all fit on them if I break them down properly. Now, the next pumpkin that I have, get that out of the way. The next pumpkin that I have over to this side is a French, highly traditional, very, very well suited to cooking pumpkin. It's called a Mesquite Provence. if this one were allowed to age longer on the vine, it would actually turn to a deep kind of caramelly brown color, almost a soil brown. And its innards become incredibly sweet, and it is used all over France in many, many, many dishes. But the inside of it is very stringy, kind of like if you've ever had spaghetti squash, something like that. It's along those lines. And so when we roast it, we're going to actually get a lot of stringing out, which is fine. And it's got nice light ribbing. It has a little bit of where it was on the soil a little too long on one side. That's fine. That's how they grow. Oh, look, some fell out. And I have as you can tell, seeded these just to be able to show them off because I think they're lovely. But then I left this gorgeous pumpkin for last. Let me move the Mesquite. Finally, we have this lovely flat white Boer-Ford pumpkin. This is a South African pumpkin that made its way to the US and took off. It's also sometimes called the stacker pumpkin because if you look at it, they all grow like this and you can just stack them on top of each other. They're often just used ornamentally, which is kind of sad because when you crack them open, they have the most delicious, lightly sweet, tender flesh when they're baked. And these and the Mesquite are really sought after for pies. So is the Porcelain Doll. It was hybridized to become not only just a pretty pumpkin that everybody's going to use in decorations, but a pie pumpkin because its flesh is delicious. If you can't tell, I really like pumpkin. And I'm going to show you how to crack open a pumpkin. A lot of people suggest using something like a cleaver and a mallet. And honestly, for the Porcelain Doll over here, I could have used that because its flesh is very thick and dense, which is fantastic. Its skin also holds up like the dickens. You have to fight it for a little bit. And I did, and realized that I need to do arm day more often. So there was that. But whatever. Starting here at the stem, the stems are going to be kind of hard. These usually have a long stem left on them because it kind of tends to grow flat against the pumpkin. You can even see like the divot where it was. But like I said, it's very supple on the inside. And so I'm just going to start a cut, outward from, you can follow the ribs or you can just try to cut straight as possible all around it. And this one is yielding very well to me, which I appreciate. Otherwise, you can use a serrated knife, something like that. And once you get to the stem, you're not going to be able to really saw through the stem. You don't want to, that's fine. You take it and you just go, Hulk Hogan on it and rip it open. And then you can take the stem off. Haha. And as you can see, oh my God, it smells so good. This one has a very sweet, very vegetal smell to it. But it's got its very light, very sweet flesh to it. And it's got a really tight interior full of seeds. Now, these seeds, pepitas also in Spanish, these seeds can be roasted, delicious, or if you're up for the challenge because you need a little bit of space for these, you can plant them and grow your own. I believe spring-ish is a good time to plant them and they'll be ready by fall. But they need good sun, good water, good soil, of course. And wherever you're located, I'm sure there's a resource online for your state's agricultural district to tell you when is a good time to plant them and how. So I'm going to go ahead and get all the strings and seeds out. I don't want those. The seeds of the 3 different pumpkins are incredibly easy to tell apart. So they're small and kind of almond shaped, but they're a little bit thick. These are from the Porcelain Doll. Over on this side, we have long, thin seeds. If you can see, it's very long, very thin. It's not fat and plump like the Porcelain Doll. This, that is from the Mesquite Provence. And then for our white pumpkin, we have white seeds. So they'll be easy to tell apart. I'm going to save a few of each one because we may attempt to grow some pumpkins next year, and I think it would be fun. And why not carry on the heritage of these heirloom heritage pumpkins, right? So let's get the guts out. And in the meantime, while you're getting guts out and stuff, you should let your oven start preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then prep some baking sheets or whatever with either aluminum foil, tin foil, whatever you call it, or parchment. Again, I have mine on parchment. As long as it's something that kind of just, protects your baking dish. Because, again, these are sugary. And they are a sugary fruit. And so it will get sticky and it will release a lot of those sugars and kind of, it'll make a mess that you don't want to have to clean up because it will not be easy. But let's just get all of these out. And the reason I have the 3 pumpkins is I have a couple of recipes that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. And the cool thing about self-roasted pumpkin, not that it roasts itself, but that, at home, work with me. The cool thing about them is, while the flesh is really safe, I can't say safe or not safe. It's better if it's eaten in a week, if it's kept in the fridge. And of course, with a lot of holidays coming up, it usually doesn't make it that long inside the fridge because it's being used for so many other things. Or it can last about 3 months in the freezer. If you seal it really well, you can get maybe a month or 2 more. You just don't want to do that because it can impact the flavor pretty significantly after a while. Once you have them clean, you need a vegetable oil, a vegetable spray, something like that. Olive oil works really well here too, just because the flavor is kind of amazing. And you want to spray the inside of the pumpkin with just a little bit of the oil, and you're just going to smear it all about. This helps in the roasting process, kind of bring some of the heat through and help it transfer a little bit better. It doesn't take very much at all. You just want the outside to be a little slick. And once you have proper oiling over all your pumpkin bits, you're going to take salt and just sprinkle, not a lot. That's probably 1/8 teaspoon. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more where my thumb was. There we are. And it just helps kind of with the flavor. Just a tiny bit. And then we put this on our baking dish. I will in a second. But I'm going to get these all prepped. And then what I'm going to do is, in my hot box at 400 degrees, remember, I'm going to roast these, because there's so much of them, for about an hour to an hour and a half. If you only have 1 or 2, especially the little sugar pie pumpkins, which are fantastic. They are bred for it. They are tender, delicious, and traditional pumpkin smell and flavor that you are used to. These are just kind of pushing boundaries. I just happen to like these breeds. Those maybe 30, 45 minutes at 400. Or if you have the time, You can leave them at 200 degrees for 8 to 10 hours. Overnight's usually pretty good. And you just let them slow roast. You get even more sweetness, even more tenderness from them because they break down just that much more. And once I have them roasted, I will come back because I'm going to let them sit for about an hour to cool enough to handle, because we're working with something with a lot of sugar in it and it will burn like your hands, because sugar just doesn't care about boiling points. And so I will see y'all back in about 2.5 hours my time and 3 seconds in yours. See you soon. Okay, we are back. I am ready to start processing the first pumpkin, or at least the first half of a pumpkin. This is the Mesquite. It ended up cooking right about like 35-40 minutes, so I had to go ahead and take it out of the oven while the others continued to roast. I did go ahead and cut them all into quarters just to give them an extra chance of roasting a little bit faster and getting more surface area for more of the caramelization to happen. The others finished about... Can't even see those behind me. The others finished about 10 minutes ago or so. They had to roast an additional 30 minutes after the 45, just because they had so much more flesh to them. They were so much thicker, and I just wanted them to get just a little bit extra time to make sure they really broke down to a soft, tender consistency. So they are screaming hot, and I will not be processing them just yet, but you don't need to see all of them done, right? So let's start with this one then. And I'm gonna go ahead, and I have a spoon because this is very tender pumpkin meat. And like I said earlier, it comes out in strings just like a spaghetti squash or something, at least for this one. Not all pumpkins will have the same texture. Some do come out as the jammy fruit already. And if you've roasted it enough, it may fall apart on you, like this one is here. And I'm just going to scrape out as much of the interior pumpkin as possible. And what I'm doing with this is this one half of a pumpkin, at least about 1.5 cups or so of it, is going to be part of our dinner tonight. And that's going to be a pasta sauce. Yes, a pumpkin pasta sauce that I will walk you through after processing the pumpkin. This is a video that has it's a twofer for you. And the rest of the pumpkin is probably going to end up as pumpkin pies that I will give to my neighbors, and my family will eat, probably. And then pumpkin muffins and things like that. Like I said, I have several other pumpkin recipes already on my radar. And so all of this will be going into the freezer in baggies. Which just put like a cup or two in like a small sandwich bag or something, lay it flat, and then let it freeze like that. And it's easy because then you can just stack them up and they don't take up a huge amount of space, and they're faster to thaw because you can just lay the package down on a counter or something that's a little bit warm, and it'll thaw through instead of having like the ball at the bottom that takes forever. You've got this flat package. All right, just gonna get the rest of this pumpkin into my food processor. If you don't have a food processor, one of the cool things about this is super duper tender. You can actually use, if you have an electric mixer, like just beaters, use those. They'll break it down really, really fast. Gonna have to scrape that. And you can use a blender if you have one. Or if you don't have any of those, that's cool. Grab a couple of, like a fork, or like a really big fork if you have one, or a good whisk, a potato masher, anything that you can kind of get down that has a way to really mush up the meat. of this, the flesh, if you will. Because it will be tender enough to actually do that. Now, one thing you'll notice when you start preparing it is that there is an enormous amount of water that comes out. And even in this tray, there's a good bit of the pumpkin water. It's incredibly sweet, so I do want to retain that. Just gonna toss this in my sink, even though it will go to my sister-in-law's goats, and they all have some roasted pumpkin treat. But I want the liquid. That was probably a good 1/4 cup just out of this pumpkin. And whenever you're getting ready to make your pies or whatever, you'll just take this, put it into a skillet, a pan, into a baking dish, and you can pop it in the oven then on a low temperature. And you're just going to kind of let it heat through, not to a boiling or anything, but just hot enough that the water will start evaporating out of it. And that way it'll also condense the sugars down into it while losing the wateriness. But I want to keep all that juice in there just because eventually it will be a tasty, tasty addition when I have to, you know, turn this into something else. All right, so we're gonna get the top on this, and I apologize now for the noise. I will fast forward us through this and see in just a second, or 3. Be sure to scrape down the sides if you're using a processor or a blender, just to make sure you get any fibers that kind of jumped out of the pool. And there we go. And I'm just going to process this another 30 seconds or so. And that's it, really. Getting it prepared to roast and then roasting is the longest part. And thankfully, the roasting is not an active part. However, this pumpkin is ready for use. So again, I can freeze this back, or I can go ahead and use it now because I'm gonna in just a minute. You can do whatever you want with it. It's your puree. But let me just, yum. Oh my gosh, I forgot how good these pumpkins are. Again, that was the Mesquite. So, yeah, have a little veggie snack. It's sweet, not sugary sweet, but it has a sweetness to it. It's a little nutty from the roasting, and also just from the natural flavor of this pumpkin. A little earthy. Very simple, very easy to work with. So I'm really excited to get to use this one. A lot of this will be going into baggies, like I said, after I blend all the pumpkin together, because I do want all of their flavors to mingle because it gives a really nice profile. But use whatever pumpkins you can get. They'll be fantastic. And I'm going to take just a second and get set up for the sauce, and I'll see you back. All right, so I have set up to make some pasta sauce. In my pan already, I have a tablespoon of butter. You can also just use oil if you want. Olive oil would be amazing with this, but just whatever you got. And then 1 small sweet onion, just the whole thing diced up. I do have a video that I posted a couple of weeks ago, depending on how long ago I made this one, that walks you through dicing an onion. So put in a full diced small onion. Use whatever one you got. Red onions would be really great in this as well, because they'll give a little kick with all that sweetness that we're going to have. On top of that, I do have my pureed pumpkin. As you can see, it's still very much in the processor. I I have a 15-ounce can of tomato puree. You can also use diced or crushed tomatoes if you would like. Ground pepper, just going to be to taste. And in here I have 2 tablespoons of parsley, one half teaspoon of Spanish sweet paprika, and then a half teaspoon of smoked sweet paprika. I know. So a teaspoon of paprika. If you have just regular, that's fine. The smoky I just like because it adds to that roasty flavor, but it is not required by any means. And then as well, I also have half a teaspoon of salt and 1 full teaspoon of basil. Then in here, I have 2 full cloves of garlic minced up. You can do 2 to 3. This is about a tablespoon and a half. Surprise ingredient. I have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then nutmeg. And this is a whole nutmeg. We're going to use about 1/4 teaspoon if you have dried. That way you can measure it out correctly. And let's get started by sauteing this onion just a little bit. So heat on. And we're just going to let this start heating up. Thankfully, since this is induction, it's pretty much instantaneous that it starts heating. So we're going to let that go for just a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and get my nutmeg grated in with my cinnamon. That's a good 1/4 teaspoon. Oh my gosh. So this pasta sauce is going to taste like fall and the best marinara you've ever had a baby, because it does have the tomato, and we're going to let that sweeten it a little bit, which tomatoes add their own. And then the pumpkin as well. So it's going to be equal parts pumpkin to tomato as well. So if you're using diced tomatoes or crushed tomatoes in a can for the 15-ounce can, I'm going to do it. Use your can as your measure, because why not? It's already there. Don't dirty another dish. You can just rinse it out and then recycle it. Also, this usually calls for some apple cider vinegar or balsamic vinegar. I don't really want the bite tonight, and we can't really use balsamic in this house because my husband's allergic. So the apple cider vinegar would be nice if I was doing something with, I don't know, a softer meat, things like that. Like if I was doing like pork cutlets or something with this sauce, I would add the vinegar because that adds that nice cut to the slight fattiness of the cutlets. Instead, I'm going to hold on to the sweetness and then emphasize the fattiness because I'm going to be making meatballs, beef ones, and I want them to be almost aggressively comforting. So comfort food, yay. Let's check in on our onions. It looks like the butter is melting nicely. And all we're going to want is for them to get a little bit translucent. So just a little bit cooked through and softened, because it will continue to cook for a bit. This one also calls for things like bell peppers, but I didn't want it to be that bulky because the meatballs themselves have a lot of things going on with them, so we didn't need it to be that complex tonight. Let's just keep this going for a few more minutes. Some of them have started to soften ever so slightly. We just need them to keep going. Raise the temperature up to about medium-low. So, like, on a 10 scale, we're looking at maybe 3.5 to 4. But we're not looking to get any color on these onions. We just need them to kind of soften through. So I'm going to continue sauteing these for just a minute or two, and I'll see you back in about 3 seconds. Okay, so the onion has started to go a little bit on the translucent side, which is perfect. And we're going to go ahead and add our garlic in so it can start doing its beautiful, lovely things in the pan. And if you don't like garlic, that's okay, don't add it. It does give a dimension to the sauce that is something that's unexpected with pumpkin, because the moment you taste pumpkin, you're like, oh my gosh, this would be sweet. And then you have this super savory flavor instead coming at you. But that's okay. I also know that there's folks who are allergic to whatever. I used to be allergic to white onions. I get it. So. And I'm just going to let this saute for just a minute. We don't want it to let it go for too long with just the garlic and onions, without any kind of liquid or something to kind of help mitigate the heat, because garlic does burn very, very quickly, and it is not a tasty taste. It's very bitter. Oh yeah, that garlic is fulfilling its destiny. It's smelling so sweet and good right now. So let's continue building the sauce. Into this, I'm going to go ahead and start adding all of our spices and herbs. So again, this is our cinnamon and our nutmeg that I grated just a second ago. And I have about half a teaspoon of black pepper. You don't have to use freshly ground if you don't have a grinder. That is okay. And finally, all of our herbs and some spices in that. And we're going to let that just toss about for a second. Start getting things a little toasty, a little happy, and butter drunk. Okay, and once it's super aromatic, once everything's kind of heated through and starting to get its spicy, herby goodness going, let's go ahead and add our tomato. Leave no one behind. And I like tomato puree because it doesn't tend to be very watery, so it's not going to loosen your sauce a whole lot, and it has more of the real flesh of the tomatoes in it, so it tends to have a more sweet and definitely a more tomato, like assertive tomato flavor. If you have tomato sauce, use tomato sauce. Not a big deal. For a fast night meal, that's a little different. Alright, we're going to let the tomato sauce heat up just slightly, and let me move my measuring cups. And I'm going to measure out the equivalent amount of pumpkin while the tomato heats through. And we are going by volume, not by weight at this point. It'll be roughly the same, but there may be a little bit of discrepancy. Alright, and now get our pumpkin in there. No child and no gourd gets left behind. And this is not your typical pasta sauce. As you can tell, it takes on a more creamy visual. And it's going to have a slight nutty, sweet, something's not quite just a pasta sauce flavor. And like I said, it adds in vegetables. So broad variety and a little bit of fiber. It does add some natural sugars, of course. But it's a way to get, veggies packed into food too, so just saying. And we're just going to continue letting this heat through for just a minute, because we're almost done. It's the best part about this sauce, is it does go very, very quickly once you have everything really going. It's the onions that you have to wait on. Just going to let that sit. I'm going to drop it all the way to its lowest heat, just so it kind of holds on. And in the meantime, I guess it's time to say goodbye. So I hope you enjoy making this recipe and roasting pumpkins as much as I do. You get a lot more for your money Like, cans of pumpkin can run a little pricey sometimes. And every now and then there's a shortage. Like right now, since we're still in the COVID pandemic, I know a lot of canning companies are having some trouble keeping up production because they dutifully and intelligently and humanely want to protect their employees as much as possible. And I get that. So you find what you can and you work with it. If you can find pumpkins near you and they're affordable enough, some of them can be pricey. Get what you can. Make your own. Freeze it back. And you'll have it for a while. And then maybe play with it, experiment with it. And know that from start to finish, it was yours. And until I see you all again, bye.